All right, welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Michelle Monroe. I am the Central Coordinator for Parent, Caregiver, and Community Engagement with the Toronto District School Board. One of the portfolios within my office right now are community advisory committees. The purpose of this session is to begin to just go deeply into PR 741 and 742 in thematic areas. So before I get started, why don't we open with our land acknowledgement? The land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the William Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. All right, so I am going to just go right in and just begin with an overview quickly of the CAC procedures itself. And just to remind everyone that the Community Advisory Committee procedures have been approved. There are two procedures, one 741 that is specifically earmarked and called Board of Trustees Governance Procedure, and then 742, which is specifically related to community members, advisory, parent, caregivers. This was designed to try to ensure that all stakeholders were able to get access and clarity around their role, functions within CACs, within the TDSB, and try a way to do that in a succinct way that brought clarity. So the governance procedure is a procedure that includes provisions that pertain to authority and responsibility of the board and trustees and requires the board's approval. So within CACs, CACs are committees of the Board of Trustees. They're responsible for the establishment, dissolution, approval of term of reference, as well as provisions related to roles and responsibilities of individual trustees sitting on CACs. PR 742 specifically looks at roles, responsibility provisions around the operations of community advisory committees, roles and responsibilities of membership of the community advisory committees. The procedure also supports the implementation of the community engagement policy P078, which will be en route for revision to the board. And it is in alignment with Regulation 612, which is the regulation that governs the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, and Regulation 46497, which governs within TDSB, the Special Education Advisory Committee. I wanted to just share again how community advisory committees are defined within the TDSB. It is a committee of the board that provides the board with ongoing community advice on areas of board policy, as well on educational issues of community interests. They include committees established with PAC and also CAC. These are the present active community advisory committees right now within the Toronto District School Board. I won't read them out. I'll just leave them because I'm sure many folks are fairly familiar with those already. And these are our statutory community advisory committees. I want to take the opportunity here to continue to provide clarity, because when folks see this, the question they ask is, Michelle, if PAC and CAC are legislated, meaning are mandated by the Ministry of Education, what is the Toronto District's purview over, and this new procedure over these two committees? As you'll note throughout the procedure, it clearly states that this procedure comes into effect where the two regulations do not apply. So those are the only places where this regulation will come in. Regulation 612 and 464 will take precedent in areas that are outlined, but there are areas within the regulation in terms of the operations of this committee that may be redirected to the new procedure in light of the absence of it being covered within the legislation. So this procedure in no way overrides Regulation 612 or 33010 or Regulation 464997. So a couple of areas I wanted to flag. I am going to use a funnel approach to get to the CAC review process that was approved with the approval of the CAC review. However, I wanted to just highlight for you just a broad overview as to how we're going to get there. So the new procedure speaks of the establishment of CACs, and of course, this falls within the purview of the board. And the board will establish CACs, including PIAC and CAC. Let me clarify again what we mean by PIAC and CAC. We're fully aware that it's within the statutory regulations that we must have them. However, within that statutory regulation, the board is required to appoint or elect trustees who sit on those committees. So this will be a part of the board's process each year within Board.org when they are identifying community advisory committees and also at the same time engaging in elections or appointments of trustees who will sit on those committees. PIAC and CAC is a part of that process. That process is not outlined in the statutory documents. So therefore, we wanted to ensure that it gets covered within the new procedures. The Board of Trustees may now amend or dissolve a CAC, again, subject to the legislation, and all advisory committees will be used using the CAC review criteria every 3 years. Terms of reference is also now within the purview of the Board of Trustees decisions and may be prompted by the review of the annual report. This annual report is a report that CACs are required to submit to the Board of Trustees each year that outlines their activities, the self-evaluation, which is also the required tool that CACs are required to submit each year, resolution of the CAC, a recommendation report by the Director of Education can sort of instigate a review of terms of reference. 6.3 speaks to the following factors will be considered when amending a CAC, the result findings of that report, whether that the advisory committees produce material, resources, function, what's happening in the broader public interest around the committee, new issues of the board or public concerns, meaning maybe an existing advisory committee is now in conflict with legislative directions that have come down. And so the board needs to take a look at that mandate and tweak it. And committee's term. It may be that the CAC has maxed their term and their mandate, as was previously defined. Our report, terms of reference, a report addressing the proposed changes to the terms of reference will be presented to the Board of Trustees. And all reports that go to the board are required to be prepared by staff. And this report will address things like assessment of the following factors, the mandate of the CAC's relevancy, the committee's mandate, is it achievable? Have they achieved their mandate? The CAC's mandate, is it unique, meaning not in conflict with other mandates or the multi-year strategic plan? Mandate aligned with the multi-year strategic plan? Is it operating effectively, efficiently, etc.? Now, within this new procedure, the board also has the purview to dissolve. Right? The dissolution of a CAC can occur in an organizational meeting or by resolution at any time as required by the Board of Trustees. There's a process outlined around the dissolution of a CAC. It may be prompted to the expiration of their term, completion of their mandate, resolution of issues, an annual review process, the outcome of an annual review process, a CAC resolution. We have had where the CACs have come forward and said, we've met our mandate, legislative requirements now have taken place, is now replaced the work that we were doing, so we no longer need to be in existence, or the CAC has blatantly outright breached board policy and procedures, and there's been a recommendation of the dissolve based on those practices. So now I'm going to get to the review. The CAC review was approved, as I said earlier, and the process outlined within 6.4.3 is that there will be notification to all CACs of the review and processed by the senior resource staff that supports the community advisory community. The criteria that will be used to provide a report to the Board of Trustees on the review will entail, again, results of the annual report, which measures progress against the mandate of the CAC, results of the self-evaluation, which measures operational effectiveness, and in meetings, attendance, quorum, overall, the effective operations of the CAC, reports recommendations that the CAC has moved forward. Again, as a gentle reminder, why that's relevant, because Community Advisory Committee's mandate is to advise the Board of Trustees. And so this would be relevancy in terms of how regularly, how often. I'm sorry, the findings of the review will be presented to the Board of Trustees within recommendation. And again, this is a report that will be provided by staff to the Board of Trustees for their information, and it will then become the discretion of the Board of Trustees as to how they move forward on the report that's provided for information. So I've been hearing a lot of questions around, Michelle, so what are the possible outcomes of this review? And is it that the intent of the review is to dissolve CACs? I want to say absolutely not. This is not the intent of the review. I said it in my micro session yesterday that any organization that has the number of committees that operate like we do within the Toronto District School Board, it's embedded as best practice that we engage in an annual review process of those committees to ensure, one, they're still in alignment with their mandate. Two, they're in alignment with the multi-year strategic priorities of the district. They are operating effectively. And so the activity here is not for the intent to dissolve. The activity here is just that, to review how you are operating. So possible outcomes is trustees may look at the information and report presented by staff, and the decision may be that this is fine. This is one of the CACs that will move forward for approval, and then it will move forward as that. Revision of the mandate. Trustees may look at the mandate and say, we're intrigued with this mandate. This mandate has been in place for some time. Is it still relevant? And may seek further information around that. Could be in relation to one, the multi-year strategic plan, in relation to emerging issues, realities of the context that we are in now within education, within our city and our district. The other possible outcome is review and or revise of the terms of reference. There may be elements in the terms of reference that the trustees may say, we really need to take a look at these key areas and we'd like to see this more emphasized in the terms of reference. So that will be redirected back to staff and redirected back to the CAC for review. Or the other option is dissolution of a CAC, which will be, we believe at this time in this content and context that this Community Advisory Committee has met its mandate, or we have legislation that has now replaced the operating functions of this committee, or our multi-year strategic plan are already addressing these key areas. And so that is one of the multiple options. And so I just wanted to reassure our co-chairs, our committees, that the intent of this process is not to eliminate or do away. It really is just a review to ensure effectiveness of the operation and to ensure that CACs and our members and their time are being well spent and they're moving recommendations forward, but also that trustees are receiving what they need to then effectively communicate back and make informed decisions. So what CACs are up for review this year? These are the community advisory committees that were approved for review: alternative schools, the community use of schools, early years, environmental, equity, and French as a second language. The review process I identified before, and you have the opportunity to look at the governance procedure and take a look at the process again as it relates to what that will entail. And so the process around the review, here are the review timelines for this year. We have two options that we've outlined already to our CAC co-chairs and to our staff, and we want to continue to reiterate it. The first CAC review timeline is that that staff will engage in a review process that will result in a report getting to our GPC for May, which tentatively may get to our June meeting, which tentatively may be ready for the November 24 board organizational meeting. If that's not viable at this time, then we're looking at option 2, where staff will be aiming to get a report to the September 11 GPC, pending the schedule remains the same, an October board meeting, and then be ready for the approved trustees' recommendations of CAC for the November board organizational meeting. And for just a reminder, the organizational meetings that happens within the board of trustees is solely for the purpose of getting trustees elected and appointed to the standing committees of the board and also the community advisory committees. So when I say standing committees, let me clarify, that's just simply committees that are made up of the Board of Trustees, and that may include the Program and School Services Committee, the Financial Budget Enrollment Committee, our Program and School Services Committee, and those are standing committees that are made up. Membership is composed solely of the trustees. And at this meeting, it is determined what trustees will sit or co-chair which of the advisory committees. That process that takes place at board organization is really the process whereby which the board is approving the operations of the community advisory committees. So the CAC review process, just a bit more detail. So senior staff will provide notification to CACs of the review process. I have connected with senior staff, but I've also connected with CAC co-chairs and gave them a heads up that this process is ongoing. And I will continue through my office to find ways to make this clear and transparent to our CAC co-chairs, because we want them to be fully aware and not see this as a surprise. I have been having this dialogue with our CAC co-chairs in our meetings for the last year. And so we hope that this will not come as a surprise, particularly those CACs that are up for review. Results of the annual report, which measures progress. So staff will be provided with the template. All staff will be using the same standard template for the review. That template will look at elements of your annual report. It will look at elements of your self-evaluation and the alignment with some of the multi-year strategic plan priorities. Once the report is completed, staff will then forward that information to the board for their information. One of the best practices my office is encouraging with staff is that this report gets shared with the CAC co-chairs, that there'll be no surprise as to what that template will entail or what the report and the information is. And I want to emphasize very clearly that staff does not have the purview over community advisory committees. As mentioned earlier, staff does not have the purview to dissolve, to establish. That power rests within the Board of Trustees. Staff's role in this process is really to provide a report to the board outlining information around the community advisory committees and providing trustees with the best information, thereby enabling trustees to make determination about about decisions regarding the CACs that are up for review. All right, the CAC review process. Please ensure that annual reports for 21, 22, and 2023 have been submitted to the board. Each year, I know that I've made it a priority to be saying to our CAC co-chairs, please ensure that those reports have moved forward to the board, because these documents are going to be essential in parts of the information that we collect to share with trustees around the review. The exact same thing for the self-evaluation and also accumulation of CAC recommendations to the board and also assembling of the terms of reference. It's just a re-emphasizing again that these are the key elements that will be looked at. One of the key questions that has been placed to me has been around, Michelle, how within your template will you ensure that if CACs want to offer some additional information that may not reflect a reporting out to the board, but has reflect implications of the work that they have done within this time frame? Will that be possible? And yes, there is a thinking to add an element in the CAC review template that will provide the opportunity to include work that has been done by the CAC that has had impact and implication on policy. because again, community advisory committees advise the board on policy, and to be able to be sure that that gets represented and reflected in the information that's shared with trustees. So immediate next steps. Here's what I'm asking, and I'm asking of all key stakeholders, including staff, CAC co-chairs, and members, that it is a new procedure. And I'm really encouraging that every co-chair and every member take the opportunity to review PR 741 and 742. Regardless of the number of presentations I do, I'm not going to be able to get to all of the nuances. So I'm really encouraging a review of both of those procedures. I'm asking our co-chairs and staff to ensure that upcoming CAC meetings actually includes an agenda item of the CAC review process. So staff will be able to remind the membership about the CAC review, and enabling membership and co-chairs, excuse me, to ask any questions that they may have about the process. And that, staff begins to take a look and gathering CAC self-evaluation, CAC annual reports, gathering annual reporting out to the board, any recommendations that has gone forward from the committee. And I'm sure CAC co-chairs may also, community co-chairs may also be helpful, and trustee co-chairs in this area in assisting in ensuring that the recommendations that have moved forward is effectively captured, because that's valuable information that will be shared and relayed within the report. So here's what we have been doing in rolling out sessions and information around PR 741 and 742 with our key stakeholders. So March 21st, we spoke specifically to CAC co-chairs and members. They were all invited. April, we had our first. Second, we had our first micro session, which focused specifically on impact and implications for CAC regarding PR 741 and 742. Today, we're talking about the review process very specifically. And then on April 15th, I'll be hosting another micro sessions that will be looking at the terms of reference, updates, and revisions. And this one was specifically required because one of the core impact and implications of the new procedure is that every community advisory committee will be required, if they've not started doing so, to revise their terms of reference to align with the new procedure. I have been asked, Michelle, what will be the deadline for that? Not finalized that yet, still in consultation, because we're trying to find a date that will not put additional pressure on our CAC co-chairs and membership, but also on staff, in light of the fact that the review process is taking place. So we're thinking about that the final review of terms of reference may be pushed. One of the questions about, Michelle, those advisory committees that are being reviewed, should they be looking to review their terms of reference? The answer to that is no. That the CACs that are going to be reviewed for this cycle should not be engaging in active review of their terms of reference, simply because the outcome has not yet been determined as to their status. And so earlier I mentioned what the possible outcomes may be. Once the board has made those outcomes on the CACs that are up for review, then those CACs may engage in the process of reviewing their terms of reference. What we don't want is to have community members, co-chairs, and staff engage in a rigorous process without knowing the final decision of the board. And so that is the consideration in which that decision was made. Let's ensure that we've gotten directives from the board as to what the status of those committees will be before we move forward in ensuring that terms of reference are revised. Those community advisory committees that are not up for review within this cycle, they are required to begin the work of updating their terms of reference in alignment with the new procedures. And the session on the 15th, I will be walking through more detail as to what that terms of reference update revision process will entail. And this is just the broader rollout that's been in place, just to let you know. I've been talking to staff. I hope to connect directly with trustees. We're doing these full sessions and micro sessions to try to get all of our membership informed and aware. And in the interim, I'm also looking at some tools creation. We've been asked for a template for the CAC review process. We've been asked for templates around the terms of reference in alignment with the new procedures. And there's been requests for templates at a future date, looking at updating our agenda, possibly a motion template, revising our minutes, etc. And so this is just a quick overview for you as to where we're at and what's been happening with the CAC rollout. All things review CAC procedures will be posted on the public site. If you go to www.tdsb.oe.ca, we will be updating that site with all of the information and also a link to these videos that everyone will be able to provide access. And on that note, I will now stop sharing and stop recording, and then I'm willing to take any questions that anyone may have at this time.